I would even say new economy, and some people rightly call it the new economy, which is emerging, where all in this room will have to find some rules. I'm not saying there's no need for rules, but those rules have to define faster than they come into being. The faster they are written down is the faster there'll be a need to change. In fact, I was talking to one of the large network CEO. So I said, so what's happening? He says, I don't know, Sunil. The moment I know it, moment I think there's a trend, the moment I tell my staff this is what's going to be happening, and next day I prove to be wrong because somebody has done something, or my client has figured out some other tool for marketing communication and he shows it to me that, I spent 1/10 of the money on this and got better results than you made me spend on a television channel or some other channel, whatever, right? We have seen that channels, television channels, which have been running for like 25 years, and literally 25 years. There's a channel which is television news channel which is celebrating its 25 years. And there's a channel which has just come in, right? Okay, I'll name it. Because this is an interesting case study of Times Now and NDTV. NDTV has been there for 25 years. Times Now is like all of 2.5 years. One gentleman comes and changes it all. Of course, there's a backing from Times, whatever. But it takes an Arnab Goswami like talent who nobody could have imagined. He was there in NDTV, by the way. It's not like he wasn't there in NDTV. NDTV didn't know how to use Arnab, and they had their own stars. So they are where they are, number 3 or 4. And you've got Times Now channel which just comes up, one individual. Would you know any other name in Times Now? I'm sure you watch it. You wouldn't know. There's no need to know. He's made sure that nobody gets to know. The other side of it is the same Times of India group. If in this hall I ask you, who's the Times of India editor? He's a big boss. He gets salary into some crores. Amit would know, and I would know. Some others may know in the room, but not many would know. He gets salary into some fantastic crores. Would we know his name? You read Times of India, right? You ought to know the name of the editor. But you don't. That's where it's coming to. No rules. They hired this gentleman who's great with his craft. They paid him crores. Each time he wants to leave, they give him few lakhs more. Each time he wants to leave, as if you cannot recruit another editor. As if there is no executive search company which can recruit an editor. But that's a fact. That is a fact. Why would you spend that kind of money? Is it delivering or not? Of course, top management like Amit would assess that, are we selling more newspapers? Are we getting more advertising? But you can't really say how good his mind is working. He launched products which failed, like Crest, Times Crest, those who read, he launched that. So the point, I won't make it too long. What I'm saying is that here is an industry, right? Digital media, advertising. Let's call it creative industries, So one way of clubbing them would be creative industries, where rules of profit and loss, rules of making money, valuations, they all belong. It's not like they're not listed companies or all of them are like run privately. No. We know of, companies which are listed. We know how much money they make. Actually, most of them don't make money. They lose money, but they still become some of the highest valued companies in the world. Because they can think of the future. What I'm talking about is look for that creativity in your own organizations. There could be people who may not fit into the parameters or the scales that you have for assessing them, which may change the fortune of your company. And I'm saying it could be a young MBA, it could be a young engineer, it could be whoever. The lesson to be learned from media industry is this. And I know some organizations are doing that. The first thing that the HR person asks is, why are you leaving? What are you going to do? Half the times, at least in our industry, says, oh, I'm starting something on my own. So now the standard response is, why don't you do it here? Tell us how much money you need. Right? You're going to take it from some VC, some angel investor. We'll give you those crores. Why not you do it here? So that may be the course for the future for all industries and not just restricted to creative. I'll come back with more.
So what we are hearing is that there are no rules, right? There is no autopilot. So things are not going to happen on their own, and therefore some amount of creativity and innovation is what is going to determine performance. Is that what we would all believe in? Now, if I was to pick up some examples, is auto industry down right now? Yeah. What's the order book for EcoSport? What's the order book for XUV 500? So the moment you innovate, you're not subjected to cycles of economy because you disrupt that cycle. And that's why there are no rules. And that's why there is no autopilot. You've got to be at it, you've got to be creating. So if we could also hear in terms of, if you want to create, in what direction do you create?
No, I think I'd just like to add something here from what I'm hearing. And I'm continuing with my point on remaining relevant, because I firmly believe that remaining relevant keeps organizations performing. When we talk about, the future, there was a time, people who were, who've been around 60s, 70s, and 80s, things were a little more linear, right? Now when we see the world, it's a very non-linear world. It's a hugely unpredictable world. Now, whether rules are there, which means there are no defined methods that if you do this, you will become high performing. No, there are no defined methods. But the fact is that when it's very difficult today to predict into the future because it's all very, very unpredictable, right? Let me take some examples. Who would have ever predicted that there would be, 900 million mobile connections in this country? I'm sure a decade and a half back, this prediction was not there. Who would predict that over the next 2 years, there'll be at least 100 million broadband connections in this country? It's just about a couple of million at this moment. Who would have predicted that there'll be 600 to 700 million UIDA connections in this country, which means people will be carrying UIDA cards, and things would happen that way. So there's no way in which you can predict it. So I think let's be very clear. So what's really going to keep organizations ticking, it's not some rules, as rightly said, which are there and you've got to follow them, but a fact that you've got to be ahead of the change curve. And let me give you my own example. I joined, when I moved into today India's largest telecom operator, Bharti Airtel, we had, this was way back in early 2000, we had 4 circles in India. And we were amongst not a very well-known operator. There were other operators who were better known than us. In a span of 5 years, the company went absolutely national, 26 circles in India. And that happened because of very, very clear, nothing was very clearly defined. It happened because of a very clear understanding that the company would pick up very senior people, groomed CEOs, right, and push them into different parts of the country and to lead change. Fully empowered, lead change with a great amount of self-confidence. Now, would you call that high performance? Yes. Because I think that base which was created, that foundation that was created over 4 years, has finally resulted in the Bharti Airtel being the country's best and the largest, of course some people can question the best part of it, but the largest telecom operator, 5th largest in the world, India's largest. So it's a lot about the leadership that you provide to organizations. And whether the leader has the gumption and the capability to embrace change and lead change. I think that's what really defines performance or performing organizations. That is the one single element which defines it. Of course, you can continue to add in what really sustains organizations beyond that is the fact that you ultimately got to make a difference. As somebody said, MAD, mad. You got to make a difference. But the difference that you make today becomes irrelevant tomorrow because you're always copied. I'm sure in his business, whatever they introduce today, competition copies it. Especially, if you're in a challenger market or a dominant market. If you're in a dominant market, you launch something and competition follows you. If you're in a challenger market, competition launches something and you follow them. But you need to stick to the core. While you need to respond, high-performance organizations respond. There was a time in this world when I was probably studying my management, and that was in mid-80s. I was always told, do not respond to market changes immediately. But if you look at me today, 10 years later, 15 years later, I would say, respond immediately, because you've got two bosses. Any high-performing organization's got two bosses, the customer and the employee. You got to respond to the customer because the customer is not going to wait. And you've got to be a responsive organization because you've got to give that kick to that employee for having made a sale. So to my mind, it's a huge amount of human leadership factor that defines organizations performing to their best or kind of being, on the wayside.
I was having a discussion with Amit. I'll just come back to you. I was having a discussion with Amit. He said, in our company, the average age is about 25. And
The portion that I represent, which is the digital business.
And Sunil is also talking about people winning awards at Cannes at 22, 27. And Vinod is saying leadership. So how do, and Arnab Goswami and all these guys, so how does a youngster lead in your businesses to make performance a reality? So if you could share certain examples from your line of business, that would also help us.
See, I think there are enough and more glaring examples in digital world to where youngsters have created history. So I don't have to go too far. Facebook, I'm guessing that almost every single person in this room would be a member of Facebook or is a user of Facebook. Facebook was created by Mark Zuckerberg at the age of 21, 22? He's today is 28. So age, in India, let's not go far away. In India, one of the largest e-commerce companies that everybody is talking about just got a funding of $160 million yesterday, is led by two young lads, age 32 and 30. Sachin Bansal and Benny Bansal, not related. They insist on saying that.